Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm wicked excited to be here today, and I hope that you're excited to be listening too. All right, I'm diving right into this one. We are not stopping to collect $200. We are just going right past, right past. So here's the deal. I'm gonna call this one "Be Mindful of What You Plant." Be mindful of what you plant. Now, there's always a story, right? To like go with these episodes, how these suckers come to life. So, all right, I'm gonna give you a little background story. Okay, so about 20 years ago, excuse me, about 20 years ago, I wanted to make my mother's gravesite, right? So it was this past weekend was the 41st, 41 years. It's just unbelievable to me that my mother has been gone, physically gone for 41 years. But it was the 41st anniversary of my mother's death, of her murder. And every once in a while, this happens, right? The cycle of years where that day is May 7th. And then the very next day will be Mother's Day. Like every however many years it takes, that happens. So it was like a full weekend of like mom stuff, right? So every year I have these rituals and these ceremonies, these things that I do to honor both her life and her death. And I go down to Massachusetts and I do all these things. I'm just giving you this backstory so you know. So about 20 years ago, when I went down to the cemetery, now the thing about visiting the cemetery that's, in some ways kind of sad, but in some ways also really nice is that a lot of my family is buried in the same spot. So where my mom is now, right next door, like literally like next, like right there, next headstones over, is basically like my grandmother, my uncle, my aunt, my cousin Bunny, and my mother. So there's 5 of them like right there. And then up in the back section is my cousin Timmy. He's there as well. So there's 6 family members. It's like I would say it's like one-stop shopping, right? Like I stop and I get to visit with everybody. So when about 20 years ago, when I went down when I first moved back from California back to the East Coast, I wanted to make my mother's plot, her headstone area, look wicked nice, right? Who doesn't? And I went and I got these little plants. Okay. I want you to imagine this. They were these little, like perennial looking plants, and they had little pink flowers on them. And I just thought, oh my God, these are so cute. And they're going to grow a little bit, and every year they'll bloom and whatever. Let me tell you about these fucking plants, you guys. These little tiny, cute, unassuming, like little pinky flower things grew into beasts. I mean, like beasts. They grew into these bushes. First of all, I got bamboozled. Let me tell you, I don't know a hell of a lot. I'm a city kid, right? So I don't know a lot about like growing plants and growing things and like stuff like that. So when I went and picked these out, I just assumed, oh, they're not going to get much bigger. I wasn't looking at spacing and size and height and how these things do. I was just like, this is me. Oh, they're cute. Look at the little pink flowers, right? So these suckers grew wide. They didn't get wicked tall, but they would get bushy and wide. And they started to cover up, like my mother's like on the front of her stone, right? Like where the last name is, like boom. And I was like, okay, so like the first year, not too bad. And I would like go down. And I was like, okay, so started to become this thing where I had to cut them back every year. So in the beginning, it was just a little pruning, okay? I'm going to make my point. Stay with me. In the beginning, I would like do a little pruning. Then it got to the point where they were becoming unwieldy. Like it was just out of control. So every year I've had to like cut them down to like stubs, down to like nothing, like no branches, no leaves, no whatever. I would just hack them down and hack them down and hack them down. Right now, those of you who are gardeners, those of you who know about plants and pruning, you're probably cracking up laughing right now. I was probably doing these plants a service. I was probably helping them to grow stronger when that is not what I wanted to do. All I knew is I'm like, I don't want them blocking my mom's name. I got to hack these things back. Okay, here's the thing. About 10 years ago, I just decided that's it. I need to be done. I need to like uproot these things and get rid of them. They've become too much. They're taking up too much space. They're out of control. They're becoming a problem. They're getting in the way now. Okay. So for about 10 years, I've tried to figure out a way to get rid of these things. I would bring my shears. I would bring my little gardening, like little digger tools. I would do like all these things. And I was like, I could never, excuse me, I could not get rid of these things. Okay. Enter May 7th, 2022. Hold on. I got to take a sip. So I go down there, but this time, you guys, I go down prepared. I go down with gloves. I go down with not one shovel. I go down with a regular shovel, like with kind of like the rounded pointy tip. And then I go down with like a post hole digging kind of a shovel. And it's like probably about like, I don't know, like 12 inches long and thin and sharp. I take that sucker. I take two, what are those things cut? Those things that cut, you know, when you go clunk, clunk and you clamp them together and it cuts like bush trimmers or branch trimmers, right? I take down 2 pairs of those plus little like not a hoe, but a little garden shovel, like a hand little shovel, and then the thingy that looks like a 3-pronged little reiki thingy, right? Like a rake thing, not reiki, you know what I'm saying, right? So I'm like, and I take a yoga mat that I can kneel on, and I take these jumbo contracted garbage bags. Like I'm fucking determined, you guys. I'm like, this is it. These plants, these things have taken root for too long. They're going. Today is the day. I go down there, you guys. When I tell you, it was a battle of the wills. And one of the things I will say about me is that when I like lock onto something, when I'm determined to do something, I'm not going to stop. I might take breaks. I might take a rest and stop, but I am not leaving until it's done. When I tell you, you guys, it took me 3 hours. Not only did it take me 3 hours, but I got sweaty. I got filthy, dirty. I snapped one of the shovels, right? These things, you guys, when I finally extracted them from the earth, they must have weighed like 25 pounds each. The root balls on these things were like twice the size of my head. It was insane. Why am I telling you all of this? Because as I was fumbling around, as I was on the ground swearing and cursing and begging my mother to help me, like send in the angels, send in the spiritual team, send in any smart ideas I can have, but I figured it out. And I just worked my way around it, and I worked my way around it, and I came in from all sides, and I did whatever I needed to do. I got underneath the thing. I pulled on the thing. Like I did all these things, and I was finally able to unearth these. And while I was doing this, all I kept thinking about was this totally relates to our minds and thoughts and stories and beliefs and programs and conditioning that no longer serves us. Keep in mind, now these were things that I planted like 20 years ago. Okay. And I was like, these things need to go. And it's just like things that get planted in us when we're little kids. So this is why I was saying, right? We have to be mindful of what we plant. You must be mindful of what you plant, the things that you say to yourself. And we'll get to that in a second. Here's what we know to be true, right? The ages, you hear me say this all the time, right? When it comes to like brain science and subconscious reprogramming and the ways that we've been hypnotized by our families of origin, the schools we went to, the churches we went to, the teachers we had, the coaches we had, the shit that was said to us, maybe as a blue collar kid or whatever, right? Different cultures have different expectations and experiences of like what they should do, what life should be like, and whatever. Money beliefs, money stories, right? You got to bust your ass. You can't take a rest if you're sick. Resting is weakness. That episode, right? If you listen to that one, resisting arrest, like last week, I addressed that whole thing. But this is what I'm saying. From the ages of 0 to 7, Okay, that third trimester, like when we're still in our mom's belly until the time that we're about 7 years old, we are so deeply hypnotizable. We are so deeply programmable. We are like little sponges and we hear everything that's said to us, everything that is said to us about us. You're stupid. You're never going to learn. You're never going to amount to anything. You're too fat. You're too ugly. You're too this. You're too that, right? All the stuff that people very mindlessly, right, don't think about what they're saying around their children or to their children. These beliefs get absorbed and we become programmed and conditioned and indoctrinated into ways of being. So these things that get planted a wicked long time ago. Here's something that I want to say. Unlike the plant, I was responsible for planting that. Okay, we'll get to that. Those two plants that grew. All right. But when we're little kids, we are not responsible for those things that are said to us. What we are responsible for is what we do with those things when we get older and we start to recognize that those thoughts, those beliefs, those stories are no longer serving us. In fact, they are inhibiting us. They are no longer helpful. They have become harmful. That they are no longer, how do I say it? Those beliefs, those stories, those tools, those strategies that kept us safe or kept us alive or helped us, we believe helped us, and sometimes they actually did, right? As kids, keep us alive. They're no longer working for us. And we must be willing to go in and do some weeding. We must be willing to go in and do some pruning. We must be willing sometimes to go in and pull that motherfucker out, those beliefs, those thoughts. Now, here's what's so interesting. One of my great teachers, and I've heard this in other traditions as well, but I always think of Swami Kripalu Bapuji. Swami Kripalu, the word Kripalu means compassion, and he was my greatest. I call him like my spiritual grandfather. He was like one of my spiritual grandfathers, and he always taught that you do not have to fight the darkness. You simply turn on the light. Now, in my case, I'm at the cemetery and I'm physically wrestling with these things because they are physical things. They are external, right? These were things I literally had to get on the ground and grapple with. But so much in our lives, the things that we're actually grappling with and trying to quote unquote fight, they're actually mental things. They are things that are in our mind. And instead of fighting it, there is a better way. We turn on the light. This is something we talk about a lot in the nest. Last month's module was called Changing Hurtful Thoughts. And one of the things that I was teaching on and sharing with the members, the nesties, is that, you know, we don't have to fight a particular thought. What we do is we replace it. We take an old hurtful thought and we replace it with a better feeling thought, right? But we have to be aware, first of all, that we have thoughts that don't serve us, that we have stories that are no longer life giving or empowering, right? We have to, first of all, recognize, oh, like I'm kind of in my shit, like I'm sitting in this shitty diaper and I keep doing this. I keep repeating like a mantra, these beliefs and stuff that were programmed into our mind from a very young age. Then we have to be willing to accept that they're no longer good, they're no longer helpful, that something else needs to happen. So we can elect to change, as A Course in Miracles tells us, all thoughts that hurt. We can choose better feeling thoughts. And it's kind of like what I was doing at the cemetery. I was saying, this is no longer, I know this thing has been here for 20 years, but this thing is not only a nuisance, this thing is becoming unmanageable. And sometimes we're going to recognize in our lives that we have thoughts, behaviors, habits, beliefs, stories that have become unmanageable. Right? When we look back at addiction and alcoholism and all these different things, these things that people do, cutting themselves, harming themselves, there's 1,000 ways to self-harm, right? When we look at those things, we kind of always go back to like, what happened to you? And so often I sometimes also ask, who happened to you? What did your parents tell you about yourself? What did your siblings, how did your siblings treat you? How were you treated in school? Were you bullied? Did you have role models or teachers or heroes or people that you looked up to who saw you, who reflected back to you your own brilliance? Okay. So we have to not only, so here's going back to this. We're not responsible for the shit that was said or done to us when we were little and we didn't have power. We are now, as adults, responsible for what we do with that stuff. We have to be willing to self-reflect. This is what spiritual mentorship is all about, is recognizing that we have some stories and beliefs and patterns, this subconscious programming that we're walking around with as adults that got in there when we were very young. And we've now got to pull the root ball of these things like out, right? We have got to extract, we've got to mine, and we've got to be willing to let go of these things because they are starting to choke the life out of us. They are getting in the way, just like those bushes were, right? Getting in the way of my mother's beautiful headstone that I wanted, to be able to see when I visit, right? But in our minds, sometimes we're not willing to take a look. We just accept and assume it's like, this is just how I am. This is how my family is. This is just the kind of people we are. Like, we sometimes don't believe that we're capable of changing. And I say this to you, as long as you are alive and drawing breath and your brain is functioning, you can change. You can choose peace instead of this. You can see yourself, others, in the world differently. You can see God, source, the divine differently too. Because sometimes when you're growing up, that's one of the things that your family, your culture, your church, your whatever will try to ruin for you. Not on purpose, right? They don't mean to do it purposefully. But there's some old beliefs that have got to go. And we can replace them with better things, just like I did when I went down to the cemetery the next day on Mother's Day, May 8th, and seeing that beautiful, clean, fresh dirt. And I went and I bought some outdoor like soil to enliven, to nurture and nourish the dirt and mix it in front of the stone. And I planted these 4 new cute little perennial flowers. I was like, oh my God, these things are so beautiful and colorful and manageable. This is what I should have done all along. But when you know better, you do better. And so now I'm like, it's such a joy. And it was so nice to go down and get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, the freedom that I had from extracting these old things that I was not exactly mindful about when I planted. But man, did I learn that lesson. So here's number 2 of this. We have to be mindful of what we plant in seed within our own heads, within our own conditioned brain, like in our own minds, in our own subconscious, right? It's so important that we watch our inner dialogue, our inner language, like a hawk. We have that inner voice. A lot of times when people talk about the inner voice, they're talking about the inner critic, right? As a gateless writing teacher, we often talk about there are certain things that we do in a writing salon, in a writing session that quiets that critical mind, right? There are things that we know how to do so that the critical mind is not like, "Gah, gah, 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 gah," like attacking, 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 right? But there's also another inner voice. And whether you call that the voice of Holy Spirit, your intuition, your instinct, the voice for God, whatever you want to call it, right? Your divine intelligence. There is another voice within you that is the one that we should really be listening to. So what I'm saying is, it's not only the stuff that gets programmed in when we're little kids. We also program ourselves again and again and again by repeating it, by saying the same things, by not taking a look at the stories, the beliefs, and the bullshit, right? That we put in there and keep alive. Sometimes the people that said those awful things to us, those unkind things, those unhelpful things to us, are no longer even on the planet. They're dead and they're in the ground, and we're still hitting the play button. We're still repeating these things. So we also have to be mindful of the seeds that we're not only planting in ourselves, but in the people around us, in our children, in our nieces and nephews, in our employees, in the people who buy our programs or listen to our podcasts or are part of our social media or follow or read your newsletters or whatever. Your words have power. So we have to be so mindful about the stuff that we're choosing to plant in the world and put out into the world. We can't just how do I say this? Be really footloose and fancy free. We should be vigilant for the quality of our thoughts. We should be vigilant for the quality of our words. We should be vigilant for the quality of our love. So, this is what I'm talking about. This month in the Nest, we're doing a module called Life Life Situation, Not Life Sentences. And it's about these things that happen for a moment in time, and then we keep dragging them around behind us. I can't remember if I've ever done, I think I did do a podcast about this, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is I was laughing thinking about it because these little tiny plants that I planted 20 years ago, they were just a little life situation, but felt like they started to feel like a life sentence, like they were never going to end, that they were just going to keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger. But I realized that I had the power to uproot them. And as a spiritual mentor, this is the work that I do with others too. Our lives are shaped by the stories and the beliefs that we tell ourselves. The work that I do is helping people to edit, to question, and to write better stories. This is how we transform our life. And I often say to people, and I'm going to probably do a whole episode about this, right? You are not your stories. You are not the story. Like you are, not, oh man, the stories that we tell ourselves are not you. You are the teller of your stories. You are not your stories. You are the teller of your stories. And we get to decide what we're going to tell ourselves. So this is what I wanted to share with you today, you guys. Be mindful of what you plant in your mind, in your heart, in the minds of others, out into the world. What are you creating? What are you bringing? And take a look around at your life and notice what needs weeding, what needs pruning, and what just you need to go deep and dig that shit up and out and get rid of it. Replace it with better stuff. And it's totally possible. And I know because I've done it myself and I continue to do it. So even today, I caught myself kind of having this. It's not about not feeling difficult feelings. I'm not one of these spiritual bypasses. But today I found myself kind of thinking something that wasn't actually helpful and it was not in my favor. And I was like, nope, not doing that. And I could give 1,000 reasons why it made sense to think that. And I was like, nope, we are not getting on that train. We're going to replace that with something better. I am going to move my attention and move my mind to something that is beautiful and powerful, empowering, that has God energy, that has source energy. I brought my mind back to love, to what is possible. And I uprooted and I plucked that sucker right out. So that's my invitation to you guys too. Okay. If you found that you've got some bushes that are getting out of control in your head, show up with your tools. This is what the spiritual toolkit that I use. Oh, speaking of which, okay, 2 things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, okay? The Nest is now open year round. So if this stuff that I talk about resonates with you, if you feel like you're ready to stop trying to do it all on your own and you want some help, just go to KarenKenney.com/nest, sign up. I would love to have you join us. We have an incredible community and membership and mentorship. Also, these things that I talk about all the time, like saying, oh, in the Nest, we just did changing hurtful thoughts. And then we also did life situation, not life sentences. These are all part of what I call the spiritual toolkit. And the spiritual toolkit is going to be coming as an offer to you guys soon too, something that you can buy and do for the DIYers, right? For the people who want to do this work on your own. And then of course, obviously you always have the option to join the Nest, but be on the lookout for the spiritual toolkit because that's coming too. And that's basically what I did is I used the tools that I had, right? I literally went into my shed, I gathered my tools and I went down and I did the work that needed to be done. And I felt so much better afterwards. And this is what spiritual mentoring is like too. All right, you guys, this is what I have for you today. Be mindful of what you plant. Be mindful of those seeds that you're putting in your mind and in the ground and out into the world. Be mindful of what you plant. Wherever you go, may you leave yourself, the people, the place, the animals, and the environment better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may you be a blessing. Bye.
Hey, you guys, thank you so so much for tuning in to this episode of The Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KENNEYLIVE. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.